Oh my! My scream echoed through the air.
Honestly, how many times do I have to say it? When the glass is empty, pour the beer right away.
Oh dear, the glass is broken. Isabella, clean it up quickly.
Honestly, when will you grow up?
This is insane. Why are these people so nonchalant about doing such things? My name is Isabella, a 26-year-old housewife. I've always been slow-witted. From the moment I entered elementary school, I realized I was falling behind. I was scolded by teachers countless times. Why couldn't I do such simple things? My parents are neither particularly enthusiastic about education nor completely neglectful. When my test scores were poor, they'd say, "Do better next time," and when it continued, they suggested, "How about going to a cram school?" I tried attending a cram school once, but the teacher's pace was too fast for me to keep up. Gradually, I became reluctant to go, and I started spending time at the park instead. However, I was soon caught when the cram school contacted my parents because I hadn't been showing up. I ended up quitting the cram school. That's when things started to go downhill for me. The moment I gave up, realizing that nothing could be done, everything became inconsequential, and I started hanging out with a bad crowd. Middle school was the worst time. Every day, we loitered at a convenience store, getting into cigarettes and alcohol. I'd leave home after my parents went to sleep and return before they woke up. That cycle continued. As a result, attending regular classes during the day was impossible, and I spent most days just sleeping. It was like going to school only for lunch. Later, I managed to get into a high school where you could enroll just by writing your name, but I had no motivation to study and dropped out. At that time, I left home after endless arguments with my parents, creating a rift between us. Since then, I've been working tirelessly at part-time jobs while living alone. But as I started working and living independently, I realized how much my parents had supported my life. The chores my mother did as a matter of course weren't actually ordinary, and my father going to work every day wasn't a given. I understood how I had taken their support for granted and how naive I had been. Still, back then, due to a mix of pride and embarrassment, I couldn't bring myself to visit my parents and apologize. After that, I resolved to live earnestly. In between my part-time jobs, I revisited the basics of compulsory education. 3 years later, I passed the GED exam and decided to take the evening courses at a university. Somehow, I managed to scrape by with the minimum passing score. I was overjoyed. Although it was a lower-ranked university, it's incredible that someone like me, who used to be foolish, could go to university. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I wrote a letter to my family, sharing only the news that I had been accepted to an evening university without revealing my address. From then on, I continued my life, working during the day and attending university at night. The evening university attracted a diverse crowd. There were men in suits who perhaps came after work, as well as older women who wanted to relearn. Interacting with these people allowed me to understand various perspectives, and I consider it a valuable experience. After graduating from university, I landed an office job at a small company. If my old friends saw me now, they'd surely be surprised. My life had changed significantly. And my life took another turn, a meeting with Michael. Michael was a senior colleague at the same company. He was the one who taught me the ropes when I joined. Eventually, he started inviting me out for meals, and our relationship naturally blossomed. 3 years later, he proposed, and we got married. He wanted me to focus on our home, so I decided to leave my job. I never dreamed that the rebellious girl I once was would end up leaving her job for marriage. When it came to informing my parents about the marriage, I could only do so through a letter. After all, we had parted ways in a heated argument back then, and I feared they might no longer care about me. Following our marriage, I ended up living with my in-laws in their home. My husband was the eldest son, and it was customary for the in-laws to live together. During the marriage introduction, I didn't have a negative impression of my in-laws, and there was a part of me that craved family love, so I agreed to cohabitate without much thought. Little did I know that this would mark the beginning of a living hell. I began experiencing severe mistreatment from my in-laws and husband.
Isabella! Your cleaning is far too slow. Bathroom, toilet, weeding the garden. Do it more efficiently.
Hey! I asked for tea. How long do I have to wait? Unbelievable!
Hey, for breakfast, I prefer bread.
I'll have yogurt. Mornings are for yogurt and fruit.
My in-laws and husband were shamelessly demanding. Despite this, I clung to the strange notion that I needed their approval to be accepted by this family and in this house. So, I continued to be meek. Unfortunately, this only fueled their audacity even further.
Isabella, give me a massage.
Ah, excellent. I'll be next.
Well then, after Dad, maybe I'll get one too.
One person, 30 minutes each, for a total of an hour and a half of massages. And afterward, I brewed tea and served store-bought dessert to everyone, as if I were a housekeeper. I gradually began to suspect that I was being used for their convenience by my in-laws and husband. As a result, imperfections started creeping into the household chores I had previously executed flawlessly, and my in-laws and husband began blaming me for those shortcomings. Their tyranny escalated, and before I knew it, my in-laws and husband had turned into terrible manipulative individuals. Oh my! My scream echoed through the air.
Honestly, how many times do I have to say it? When the glass is empty, pour the beer right away.
He slammed the table as he spoke. The impact caused a glass to fall at my feet.
Oh dear, the glass is broken. Isabella, clean it up quickly.
Honestly, when will you grow up?
This was madness. How could these people be so callous? I had reached my breaking point. I wanted to go home. But where? To my mom's place? Yet, I was afraid. Would they accept me? Still, I knew that remaining in this house would drive me mentally unstable, so I made up my mind and left.
Where are you going?
Leave her alone. She's been disowned by her parents, so this is the only place she has to go.
Despite my husband's words, I ignored him and left my in-laws' home. And after approximately 10 years, I arrived in front of my parents' home. As I hesitated to press the intercom button, a voice came from behind.
Isabella.
It was my mother's voice. Mom. The moment I saw my mother, tears welled up uncontrollably. She was also crying, and she embraced me tightly. She welcomed me into the house, and there, I met my father after a long time. Holding back tears, he said, "Welcome back." I felt overjoyed. My parents didn't harbor any resentment toward me. Even after I had left without a word, they warmly received me after a decade apart. Awkwardly, I recounted everything that had happened since I left. Both my father and mother praised me, saying, "You've done well." They were pleased with my letter updates as well. As for the matter with my in-laws and husband, They were furious on my behalf. They advised me to divorce that person without hesitation. A few hours later, I received a message from my husband.
Where are you now? It's time to come back.
I replied, I'm currently at my parents' house. I won't return to that home anymore, so let's get a divorce. Almost immediately, my husband called. His angry voice made it hard to understand what he was saying, but it seemed he wanted to come here to persuade me. My parents suggested, it's a good opportunity to meet face to face, so we decided to invite my in-laws and husband over. When my in-laws arrived at my parents' home, they unleashed a torrent of insults fueled by anger. Back when I lived with them, I was somewhat fragile due to my longing for family love. However, now that I had reconciled with my own parents, that vulnerability had disappeared. Without succumbing to their verbal abuse, I firmly handed them the divorce papers, saying, it's pointless no matter what you say. Please sign for the divorce. In the end, my husband reluctantly signed the papers, rolling his eyes. Finally, I was free from those nightmarish days. And in the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed since the divorce. It was a holiday, and I was relaxing at my parents' home as usual. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. Who could it be on a Saturday morning? Since I was closest to the front door, I decided to answer. But then the intercom buzzed again. Hello? Oh, excuse me. Wait, what? When I opened the door, there stood my ex-husband and in-laws, the same people I had parted ways with 5 years ago. Why? How? My ex-husband grinned and said,
Hey there! You doing well? I figured you'd calm down by now. I'll forgive you, so come back, ha!
What are you talking about? My shout drew my father's attention, and he joined me at the entrance. He too was surprised by their presence. My ex-husband continued smirking.
You're probably still a lonely single woman, right? We'll take you back.
And then my ex-father-in-law, audaciously, chimed in.
Grandmother needs care too. Let's discuss the future.
Their nonsensical statements made me burst into laughter. Impossible.
Why are you laughing?
My ex-father-in-law snapped.
Exactly. How dare you, a lowly woman, be so cheeky?
My ex-mother-in-law chimed in. I replied, well, I was just thinking, who's speaking from a high horse here? My ex-husband retorted.
What? Who do you think you're being cheeky with?
He seemed to believe that his forceful tone, reminiscent of our cohabitation days, would sway me. Little did he know that over these 5 years, I had regained the determination I had as a former delinquent, a strong woman who wouldn't be shaken. Huh? Obviously, I'm talking to you. This abusive jerk. My ex-husband and in-laws stuttered, taken aback by my intensity. Suddenly, my voice surprised my mother, who approached, saying,
Isabella, calm down. The baby just woke up.
I apologized while cradling my daughter. Oops, sorry.
A baby?
I explained. I've remarried and have a child now. So, there's no chance of reconciliation with you. Not that I intend to, anyway.
You're kidding.
My ex-husband, clearly frustrated by the lack of compliance, retorted and kicked the flower bed outside the front door. I hurried inside, ensuring my daughter's safety, while my ex-husband attempted to force his way in. My father stepped in to stop him. In the next moment, my ex-husband let out a cry of pain.
Ouch!
Noah. Noah was my current husband. It seemed he had returned from his night shift just in time. Noah twisted my ex-husband's arm.
What are you doing?
You! What the hell? Let go!
My ex-father-in-law chimed in.
Release my son! I'll call the police!
Noah replied.
Huh? I am the police.
Ah!
Noah turned to me.
Isabella, who are these people?
Ex-husband and in-laws. They suddenly showed up, trying to force a reconciliation. When I resisted, my ex-husband got angry and kicked the flower bed.
Wait, hey. You don't need to explain so clearly.
Noah declared.
They're completely out of line. I'll call for backup.
This is ridiculous.
Soon after, a police car arrived, and my ex-in-laws and ex-husband were taken away. The neighbors watched like curious onlookers, and my ex-in-laws and ex-husband hung their heads in embarrassment as they got into the police car. And the reason my ex-in-laws and ex-husband visited me was as follows. It turns out that they had been squandering Michael's grandfather's inheritance and grandmother's pension, indulging in gambling and a life of luxury. However, when his grandmother's health deteriorated, and she needed care, her pension was being used to cover the costs of her care facility. So, they decided to call me back and try to take advantage of my family's wealth. They probably assumed that if they shouted at me, I would comply with their demands. They completely underestimated me. Upon learning that I had remarried a police officer, my ex-in-laws and ex-husband likely decided never to involve themselves with me again. By the way, let me share how I ended up marrying a police officer. During my evening university days, I became close friends with a woman in her 50s who was in the same seminar. Even after graduation, we continued to meet up for drinks regularly. After my divorce from my ex-husband, she suggested that I meet her nephew, Noah. We hit it off, and that's how we ended up getting married. Life is unpredictable, and I never imagined finding happiness through such connections and bonds. Moving forward, I plan to enjoy each day while nurturing a good relationship with my husband, parents, and watching my daughter grow.
How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
We rushed your husband to the emergency room after a traffic accident.
Suddenly receiving a call from the police, I dropped the coffee cup I was holding. It couldn't be true. Because my husband died 2 years ago when he fell into the sea. There were even witnesses. Someone must be impersonating my husband. To find out who and why someone would do such a thing, I headed to the hospital. When I visited the emergency room, I saw the pale profile of a man lying on a bed. No way, this can't be happening. I almost cried out in shock and covered my mouth with my hand. Oh, honey. It was unmistakably my husband. I am Annabelle, a 32-year-old company employee. I am raising my 4-year-old daughter alone. My husband, Tony, was supposed to have died 2 years ago. I was told that he fell into the sea and lost his life while working overseas. When I first received the news, I hope it's a case of mistaken identity. I wished, but according to the police, there were witnesses, so I had to believe it. According to those who saw it, my husband jumped in to save someone who had fallen into the sea, and then he disappeared. At that time, Sharks were also seen in the water, and it was believed that the person who fell into the sea and my husband were both eaten by the sharks. My husband was rather timid, and I was surprised that he had the courage to jump into the sea to save someone. The local police conducted multiple searches, but my husband was never found, and only his backpack was found floating in the sea. In his backpack, there were photos of me and our daughter, his wallet, and other items. Tony, who usually told me not to touch his backpack, might have been embarrassed to show that he kept our photos in it. Thinking this, my sorrow over losing my husband grew even deeper. Eventually, I had no choice but to put his backpack in the coffin as a substitute for him and held a formal funeral for closure. Why did you leave us? I was grieving the sudden loss, but I had my daughter left behind. At the time, my 2-year-old daughter didn't understand the meaning of her father's funeral and smiled while sitting on my lap. Her behavior brought tears to the attendees. Poor thing. She doesn't understand that her father has passed away. The venue was filled with whispers and sobbing. After the funeral, I faced my daughter with my best smile, determined not to cry in front of her anymore. And I decided to do my best at work and raising my child alone. 2 years passed. I got used to living without my husband, rushing every morning to get dressed and eat, and it became a routine to greet the smiling photo of my husband with, "Daddy, we're off." I took my daughter to daycare and headed to my office. My parents often told me to come back home, but I wanted to keep the promise I made to my husband before he went overseas. I'll raise our daughter well, even on my own. Since my husband's body was never found, he was legally considered missing, so I couldn't receive survivor's pension, making it financially difficult on my own. But I worked hard for my daughter's sake. Despite being only 4, my daughter helped me with folding laundry and putting away dishes, showing her consideration for me. Living with my kind and honest daughter was poor but very happy. Then one day, I received a sudden call from the police.
We rushed your husband to the emergency room after a traffic accident.
Huh? My husband died 2 years ago.
What?
The shock was so great that I dropped and broke the coffee cup I was holding. What is going on? Confused, I thought someone must be impersonating my husband. To find out who and why someone would do such a thing, I visited the hospital's emergency room, where I saw the pale profile of a man lying on a bed. No way, this can't be happening. I almost cried out in shock and covered my mouth with my hand. Oh, honey. It was unmistakably my husband. How can Tony, who was supposed to be dead, be here in America, alive? Even though I wanted to ask, he lay there unconscious. According to the police, my husband was riding a bicycle when he was hit from behind by a car. A nurse handed me his backpack as I stood there in shock. The backpack was very similar to the one I had placed in his coffin at the funeral. When I looked inside, there was a cell phone, and the home phone number in the address book was ours, which is why the police contacted me. When I opened the cell phone, I saw frequent messages exchanged with an unfamiliar woman. This woman might know about these past 2 years. I decided to call the number. I'm sorry to bother you, but do you know someone named Tony Garner? Who? I don't know anyone by that name. Why are you calling from this number? When I explained that I was using the cell phone of a man who was in a bicycle accident and carried a red and black backpack, the person on the other end of the line became quite agitated. What? This phone number belongs to my husband. He always carries a red and black backpack. But my husband's name is Andrew Diaz. Had he been living under a false name for the past 2 years? Moreover, the woman called him her husband. What is going on? I was increasingly confused. If he was alive, why hadn't he come back to me? Why was he with another woman? The more I thought about it, the less I understood. The woman said she would come to the hospital immediately. 30 minutes later, she arrived and clung to my husband's bedside, crying out, "Andrew, Andrew, hang in there." I watched in a daze. Her voice was so loud that a nurse came in and explained that he had undergone surgery for a complicated leg fracture and was still under anesthesia, so he wouldn't wake up for a while. "I'm so glad you're safe." The woman, relieved, wiped her tears and then looked at me suspiciously. "By the way, who are you? Are you a friend of his?" I took a deep breath and looked back at her. "Sorry, but that man is my husband." "What? Don't joke about such things." "I wish it were a joke." She stood up and approached me aggressively. "We have a child together. How can you say such terrible things when he's unconscious? Get out." She grabbed my shoulders and tried to push me out of the room. From her earnest expression, I felt she knew nothing either. I'm shocked too. So please, calm down and listen to me. When I showed her a photo of our family taken 2 years ago, she was shocked and agitated, but she eventually calmed down and told me her story. Her name was Bella. A very beautiful, fair-skinned 24-year-old woman. Apparently, she met my husband on a ship during a heartbroken trip overseas after a college breakup. She was comforted by him and became attracted to him, and he confessed that he fell in love with her at first sight. But he never mentioned being married. Bella continued, looking very confused. My husband told her that no matter how much he worked, all his earnings were taken by his parents, so he fled overseas. To avoid being found by his parents, he moved into Bella's apartment when they returned to America. He said once he paid off the debts his parents saddled him with, he would marry me officially. So, we didn't register our marriage, but we intended to eventually. She had been completely deceived by Tony. Thinking back, I remembered my husband's deceitful and irresponsible side. During these 2 years, thinking he was dead, only the good memories came back to me due to my sense of loss. But my husband was originally irresponsible, and he had cheated and lied to me before we got married. I shared my story from 2 years ago with Bella, who seemed equally bewildered. What on earth was he thinking? We looked at each other. I suddenly remembered and took out the notebook I had seen in his backpack. When I opened it, there was something unbelievable written inside. In the meeting room rather than my husband's hospital room, the nurse came to inform us. Your husband has woken up. When we returned to the hospital room, my husband was groaning in pain from his leg. Honey, I'm so glad you're okay. You were in a traffic accident.
Ah, Bella. You came. I remember now. I was on my bike, and suddenly I was airborne.
Upon waking up to see his young wife nearby, my husband seemed relieved. Bella, quite the actress, played the role of the caring wife well.
Have you been by my side the whole time?
Of course. It's for my dear husband.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
The husband who had abandoned me and our daughter for 2 years was flirting with a younger woman right in front of me. I felt a seething rage and approached to speak up. Oh, I've been here too. My husband widened his eyes in shock, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, we stared at each other as if time had stopped.
Annabelle. Why are you here?
The police contacted me. You left our home number registered in your cell phone.
Ah.
My husband's voice cracked completely, revealing his panic. I calmly spoke to him. So, you've become Andrew Diaz. I'm surprised.
That's...
My husband stammered, unable to form words, his face turning pale. Bella also spoke to him coldly. You lied about being single and escaping from your parents? How could you deceive me like this?
No, that wasn't my intention. I fell in love with you at first sight and just wanted to be with you.
My husband tried to make excuses, unaware that the more he spoke, the more his lies were exposed. That's strange. What you wrote in your diary contradicts what you're saying.
What? You read it?
My husband tried to snatch the diary from my hand, but in his condition, he couldn't get it back. I decided to read from it. Work abroad wasn't going well, and I wanted to escape when I met Bella. She seemed to be on a heartbreak trip, and she was easily deceived by my kind words. Her parents seem wealthy. If I stay with her, I can live comfortably. You're the worst.
That's,
Moreover, if I hire a witness to say I died at sea, I can end my marriage without paying alimony or child support. What is this all about? Realizing he couldn't talk his way out, my husband started getting angry.
How dare you read my diary? And I'm injured, you know.
Bella looked at him sadly as he turned red with anger. I can't believe I trusted and was deceived by someone like you. It's truly pathetic.
I'm sorry. But I still want to be with you. I'll divorce my wife.
At that moment, an older couple entered the hospital room. They were Bella's parents.
Why are Bella's parents here?
I called them.
You always interfere.
As my husband tried to insult me, Bella's parents began yelling at him.
How dare you deceive our daughter? We'll sue you for alimony and child support.
They declared and started to leave the room with Bella.
Bella, wait. Please.
I never want to see your face again. Despite my husband's pitiful cries, Bella and her parents left, slamming the door behind them. After a moment of silence, my husband turned to me with a pleading look.
I'm sorry. But I couldn't help it. I met my destined one. Please understand.
Oh, I see. Given the circumstances, it can't be helped. Thinking he had convinced me, my husband brightened up and took my hand.
I knew you'd understand. You're my wife after all. I'll come back to you. I'm sorry for the past 2 years.
Yes, I was lonely. He seemed to think he had smoothly persuaded me. He stroked my hand and smirked. At that moment,
Don't be ridiculous. Do you know what Annabelle has been through? I will never forgive you.
Ha! Your parents too. And my parents? Why are they all here?
in the sudden development of both sets of parents gathering in the hospital room, my husband was left gaping and wide-eyed. Everyone was furious, and it looked like they were about to pounce on him, bedridden as he was.
Annabelle, I'm sorry. Let's start over. Just get them out of here.
My husband, teary-eyed, pleaded for help, but I held back my urge to punch him and coldly told him, "The moment you abandoned me and our daughter, our ties were severed. Starting over is out of the question."
Please don't say that. I'm injured and can't move. I need someone to help me.
You brought this on yourself. We will proceed with the divorce. I will also claim alimony and child support. In reality, I had held a symbolic funeral for him 2 years ago, but we had kept our marriage on paper until the 7-year mark for a missing person declaration. Now, I could properly divorce him and cut all ties.
No way.
Also, I informed the police. The hired witness who claimed you died at sea will be caught too. You should prepare yourself.
I feel sick. Call a doctor, not the police.
Feigning weakness, he began to look pitiful. He had a habit of lying to escape when things didn't go his way.
Take responsibility for your own mess.
My father-in-law shouted at my husband. Even as he continued to look up at me with pleading eyes, I responded with a smile. Thank you for being alive. So, please make sure to pay the alimony and child support. Realizing there was no one left to save him, he covered himself with the blanket and started crying. After that, I officially divorced my husband. His parents paid $30,000 in alimony and $100,000 in child support up front. Bella also reported being deceived to the police. His parents also paid her for his alimony and child support. My husband was arrested and went to jail. When he gets out, he'll have to work hard to repay his parents, watched by strict relatives to prevent escape. It will take him a long time to repay his debts. I moved back to my parents' house and started living happily with my daughter. Now, every morning my daughter says, "Grandpa, Grandma, I'm off to school," and heads to daycare. To protect my daughter's smiling face as she grows, I will continue to do my best. How did you find this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next